We've got breaking news. Kevin McCarthy is retiring, will leave Congress at the end of the year. He shared this in a Wall Street Journal op-ed published just now. McCarthy has served in Congress for 17 years. Let's watch some of his parting announcement.
It's time to pursue my passion in a new arena. While I'll be departing the House at the end of this year, I will never, ever give up fighting for this country that I love so much.
All right. So in his op-ed, the failed Speaker of the House writes, I have decided to depart the House at the end of this year to serve America in new ways. I know my work is only getting started. I will continue to recruit our country's best and brightest to run for elected office. The Republican Party is expanding every day, and I'm committed to lending my experience to support the next generation of leaders. Okay. What a journey Kevin McCarthy has been on this year.
Gone but not forgotten.
Look, you know I'm going to say it. I have to say it. This all started in January when Republicans, the Freedom Caucus, decided to try to pull a force the vote maneuver and say, let's use the narrow margins in the House to see what we can extract for our coalition. It was successful. They held up the vote for speakership for not an unprecedented number of times. I think there was a moment about 100 years ago where they had gone even longer. But for over a dozen rounds, they kept them on the fence until they got some meaningful concessions for their faction. When progressives were being pushed to do this exact same thing 2 years before, the argument was, we can't do this to Pelosi, we might end up with Kevin McCarthy. And what sweet irony that doing this to Kevin McCarthy actually resulted in ousting someone who is perceived by this faction as being antithetical to their interests and to the interests of Republicans, and getting an opportunity to get someone in that slot who obviously I don't agree with, but who is more amenable to their particular constituents' concerns.
Yeah, Matt Gaetz wanted leadership to actually listen to Republican primary voters who had a very different view on funding Ukraine, for instance, than leadership had. And when McCarthy did finally claim the gavel some months ago, it was under the condition that he actually uphold these promises to the voters, and they held him accountable when it went awry. And so then so it's not surprising, I think, that he's leaving Congress. He was shown the door from leadership. He could have stayed on as a member, but it's probably a little demoralizing to just continue as a regular member, as the leader of the Republican Party within the House is someone else now. He'll also have, we should obviously acknowledge, has tons of opportunity to make boatloads of money doing lobbying or any kind of post-Congress future, which I have no doubt he will be involved in.
And I'm sure there'll be a book. Look, how much do you think that whole kerfuffle about him being accused of shoving that other representative? Do you remember that story from about 2 weeks ago?
Oh, he shoved Tim Burchett.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much do you think that debacle, the humiliation of that, did
there anything come of that? Was there going to be an ethics
inquiry?
Matt Gaetz said there should be an investigation of some kind.
It just feels like it's been a very bad year for Kevin McCarthy, not just with the speaker vote situation.
He's had a bad year.
Yeah, I mean, so it looks like, there'll be a special election at some point to fill his seat. He obviously is a California congressman. I don't actually know how close, how red his district is, or whether or not there's any risk to it being taken, the seat being taken by a Democrat. But I don't think that he would do this. If
it's
that
funny.
Were really at issue.
We're talking about obviously what happened to him in the last several months. But, this has been an important leader of the Republican Party, one of its foremost members for a long time, even before he was Speaker. And, he's a Republican, he's a conservative, he supported Trump at some key times. We're not talking about his philosophy, what has been his contribution to the ideological project of conservative republicanism? It's hard to say. He's not someone who conveys a lot of that's what matters, or that's what it was all about, ideas, building some movement or some coalition based on an ideological project. It seemed, I think it comes across to a lot of Republicans, frankly, as it was about He wanted the office and he wanted the power.
Yeah, look, I'm looking at Ballotopedia ranks his key votes over the last 2 years. And perhaps unsurprising for any Republican congressman, it's just a long string of nays, obviously voting against the American Rescue Plan, voting against the Inflation Reduction Act, voting against Marijuana Equity Act, voting against the For the People Voting Rights Act, voting against everything except for defense funding. Voting against the Equality Act, Respect for Marriage Act, the CHIPS Act. And so it is difficult to say what someone's legacy is or to have a good sense of what their legacy is when so much of the role they played was oppositional. And I don't think this is just a Kevin McCarthy problem. I think it's a broader Republican Party problem, especially establishment Republicans. What is the affirmative vision that you're offering the world as opposed to just criticizing what Democrats and Biden are doing?
Sure. I mean, thwarting what is in the Republican or in the conservative view, excessive or needless government spending or government growth can, in fact, be a signature achievement or an ideological position. I would agree with a lot of those votes, disagree with other votes that he's taken. But I hear you on not having an affirmative vision for the country, which is where conservatives seem to fail to persuade their fellow Americans. We should read a statement from Representative Matt Gaetz responding to McCarthy's announcement. He writes on X, McLeavin. Good one, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, to your last point.
There's no love lost here.
There's no love lost. I also think this is an issue that's maybe impacting the Republican presidential candidate's inability to get ahead. One way to get ahead, obviously, is to argue, in a traditional context, attack the leader, attack Trump. That doesn't seem to have been successful for anybody. I understand why they're not doing it. But there is this other option, which is to today present an alternative plan. What are you going to offer that Trump isn't going to offer? Can you say that you have an agenda for America that's better than Trump's? Trump has been saying, for example, that he wants to undo Obamacare. That is not a popular plan, and he chose not to do that when he actually was president, I think because there was so much public backlash around it. But Obamacare is also unpopular on its own. The problem is there's no alternative. Are you a Republican who can finally come up with an alternative for Obamacare instead of just inveighing against it like Donald Trump? I'd like to see that. Maybe that would start to move numbers. Maybe not. But I do think there is a broader kind of holistic problem with the Republican Party where if you're only playing against the guy that's in office right now, do you lose a lot of credibility and steam when you actually are the dog that catches the tire and you have to lead?
Well, and very often it's not a principled opposition to spending or government growth. Sure. When they easily cough up, with your few exceptions, your Masseys, your Pauls, et cetera, easily cough up the funding for whatever the foreign project is.
Yeah.
I wanted to note this earlier, but I saw that DeSantis, did you see this reporting that DeSantis is privately conceding that there's absolutely no way to beat Trump and that he maybe shouldn't have done this run after all?
Right, that this wasn't his time. Look, he can still hang in there and hope that something happens with one of Trump's indictments that clears the path for him. But yeah, doing it the traditional way doesn't seem to be working.
Can still hold out hope for that. More Rising right after this.